Welcome.
Yes.
It's good to have you here, man.
It's great to be here. It's great to see you guys again.
We're welcoming Mark Baldwin, director, editor, writer, voiceover person.
Yeah. Voiceover artist extraordinaire. Yeah. Well, I guess I don't know what the right place to start is, but at least it's fresh in mind for me because I revisited Dr. Strangelove last night.
Did. I watched it yesterday.
In anticipation of having you on. And that's
Which was your selection?
Yes, it was. It was Mark's selection. And obviously it's a classic, so I'm not contributing anything new to the conversation here, but I hadn't seen it probably in a good 10 years. And obviously it's a movie that has like such rewatch value. I think you get something different out of it every time. But I did watch it with a group of people last night. And
newbies.
Two newbies who hadn't seen it, which was nice. Because I feel like every time I've watched it, it's always been either with you or you're throwing it back on because you're like, oh, I've seen it, but there's just something here. It's like there's something familiar about it. But it was kind of fun to see it, I think, in a fresh context. I don't know. It's encouraging to see that a movie like that hasn't really aged today, and the absurdism and the comedy and the satire of it all is just still as sharp and biting as ever.
And it's always good to watch a comedy in a group.
Yes. Yeah.
Because the laughter builds 100%. In a certain way, and you can see the reaction so instantly.
Yeah.
With the drama, sometimes people are just kind of staring at it. But in a comedy, you get an immediate reaction.
Yeah.
And I was all by myself, but I was laughing out loud.
I was too.
It was really fun. And I watched this little documentary that's on the Criterion disc that I have. Mm-hmm. And I had spotted the guy that plays the ambassador from Russia starting to laugh at Peter Sellers, and there's no getting it out of there. Yeah. And apparently there was a story. The guy said, the editor was going, I had such a hard time just getting in to make a cut because everybody in the cast was laughing at him.
Right. And I'm sure if you had various takes, there'd just be a different person.
Because
it's a group of guys. And it's when he hits his arm.
Yes.
And he just kind of goes...
Yeah, you can clearly see it in the background. But
I learned some things I didn't know, that he had even started to shoot the Slim Pickens character as well.
Right. Yeah.
And I love that. I guess they got in some kind of beef and he hurt his foot.
Yes. Yeah. Although moving around, and I had always heard he had a heart attack or something, but I read up on it. And he hurt his ankle getting out of in the plane.
He was sitting on the bomb.
Oh yeah,
is that what happened?
In the Bombay doors. Yeah, he fell through.
Because I think I did see those photos too. I mean, I didn't go down this avenue last night, but I do remember maybe watching that.
Yeah, John, you may have seen it in the past.
But correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the kind of the prevailing theory there is that he was spread a little thing and his southern accent, he wasn't as confident with, and so like maybe the accident. The foot injury was a way to
just not play four parts.
Yeah, they had Terry Southern record the lines because Terry Southern was from Texas.
Right. So he could do the draw.
And he said, I read an interview with him, and he said, he brought him in and he learned it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think his son is on the documentary and said that Terry had recorded a lot of the dialogue, and Peter was walking around with headphones repeating it to try to get the drawl down. Yeah. I'm sure the guy's a chameleon.
Yeah.
But Slim Pickens is pretty great.
It's a great choice. It's probably better than it would have been.
True.
I mean, Peter Sellers is always wonderful, but to have that kind of...
Yeah.
And
he's so real. It's that guy.
Yeah.
And Southern said they didn't tell Pickens it was a comedy.
That's amazing.
It's great.
See, that is,
he didn't need to know that.
The genius of the movie too, I think also, it was striking me again last night. Again, it's one of these beautiful things where it's like you can revisit it time and time again and get something out of it because it has so much nutritional value. I mean, that's just Kubrick in general. It's like his movies are
they're
jam-packed with exactly. And it's so ahead of its time and even more relevant now. But I think the premise and the whole gambit of doing the thing, like playing it as a comedy, but with these really kind of like sobering moments that anchor you. Like the stuff in the plane kind of is great because it not only serves the narrative purpose of like cutting away to like, and meanwhile,
and it's each time it's ratchet, they're getting closer,
but it's also like super detail oriented in a way that of course, only Kubrick could do. And you see the very beginnings of like what became the 2001 mind of like, we're getting super technically accurate with the way they're dialing in the prefix code and like all that detail stuff is great because it kind of helps lend it a veracity.
Right. And those guys seem like really intense.
Oh, for sure.
They're very much aware of what's
in a different movie almost. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And of course the people who are directing the whole thing and invented the thing that's causing the disaster now.
Yeah.
Are just doing their usual corporate
Right.
thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Business as usual.
It didn't hit me until today when I woke up and there's only one woman literally in the entire movie
in a bikini. Yeah.
and you don't see any other women.
Yeah,
which,
no.
I mean, I guess makes sense because we're either on a military base or in the plane or the war room. But
and back in the day before, there were a whole lot. I mean, there were wax and everything, but there were no like brass.
Yeah, nobody else would have been in that war room back then. But it is odd,
and there may not be anymore now.
I mean, I think it reinforces the absurdity of the point of like it is a group of bumbling men making decisions that affect the entire world and end in catastrophe.
Well, so I know you know this. You probably know too about the pie fight, which they cut out.
Yeah,
which I would love to see.
Photos of that.
I wonder if that exists.
I don't know.
It must, right?
He may have burned it.
He was notorious for doing that, right? Where he would like get. I mean, even his early film. God, what's the one he shot that? But he basically the point of the story is that he had kind of like been on a very prime directive for all of his career as soon as he got the power and influence to like destroy prints of it because he just didn't want it to ever follow him again. And it was like his amateur first feature before the boxing one.
Oh, and he got rid of it?
We have the book here. I can just honestly pull up like his filmography because I think it's worth getting into it. He's, another thing too, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but you see his still photographer background and some of these images, the way they're composed. Like there's some really, as for a comedy, it's like, it's just such a good looking.
I thought that. Well, and the attack outside,
so amazing.
With the soldiers attacking the base.
Yeah, it's like
it was all shot like the footage we were watching from Vietnam.
Yes,
kids.
It's like exactly. You're on the ground.
On the
it's
ground,
all kind of
probably 16. I bet they did all that.
Yeah, yeah.
It felt
it's
very
incredible.
real.
I know. And that shot. What were you saying? The Sterling Hayden performance is also just like one of the most incredible casting coups. I feel like to get him to come back and do that, and he brings that authority and sort of his. I mean, I don't know exactly where he was at in his career, but you told me he came out of retirement to do it, right?
You may know more about that. I don't know.
I don't know. No,
the thing this morning that I was watching, Kubrick had to talk him out of retirement to come and play this part, but he's so good.
Yeah.
And that scary kind of good where he's an authority figure who's clearly lost his mind, but like even Peter Sellers' character is sort of wrestling with how to deal with him, not upset him.
Play along with him enough to calm him down and then maybe get the code out of him or whatever.
That movie in particular, do you remember when you saw it the first time or what it was that resonated?
I first saw pieces of it on TV. And it was that scene where Keenan Wynn comes in and, finds him dead and all that. And he's doing the whole prevert thing.
Yeah.
And I was like 12 or something when I saw that the first time. I'm like, what the heck is, good God, man.
Your pre-versions. Yeah.
And he goes into the phone booth. If you do any pre-versions in there, I'm going to...
That's private property. That was one of
You're going to have to answer the Coca-Cola company.
Yeah. And that's the truth of it.
It's so fucking funny. I love that shit. Yeah.
What I got to say in general about Strangelove is it's the proof of the power of comedy.
Yeah.
There was a film made simultaneously by Sidney Lumet called Failsafe, which I also watched.
Henry Fonda.
Yeah.
And Fonda's great. And it's a
good movie.
It's a good thriller. Yeah. But you come away with it with the standard Hollywood finish of, this was a terrible thing, but we have these responsible people, looking after us who will save the day.
Right.
And everything's kind of okay. Boy, this is a big problem, but, we'll be fine.
Yeah, yeah.
And Strangelove, they're nuts. Which is certainly, if you think about the whole nuclear thing, is accurate.
Yes.
And satire especially. I mean, there's all sorts of delineations. Oh, this is parody, and this is satire, and this is
right.
Parody is frequently referred to as being directed towards the genre. And you kind of love the genre, so you make fun of it. Ha ha.
Right.
Satire is like cutting to the bone. Yeah, it's like telling you what is really going on.
Yeah.
And letting you know that people aren't necessarily redeemable.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't necessarily have your best interests at heart. They behave like reptiles.
Yes.
That they want what they want, and that's it.
Yeah.
And Strangelove gets that across in a way that's super disturbing. It's funny and entertaining.
Yeah.
But it's also super disturbing. And no one remembers Failsafe. I mean, we do, we're film nerds, right?
True.
Yeah.
But the general public does not go around saying, wow, it's the 50th anniversary of Failsafe. You know, we should have a big screening of it and all that. But Strangelove actually made an impression.
Oh, yeah.
And it changed minds. I mean, after that film, after hearing George C. Scott say, this is a perfectly acceptable number,
20 million, you know, based on some luck.
10 to 20.
Depending on the breaks. You know?
The breaks, that's right.
You can't hear that and take it seriously after watching Strangelove.
Yeah.
And they used to, if you tuned into William F. Buckley on
they
PBS, they'd be talking about, well, of course, if we have the proper safeguards, that will survive.
It'll minimize.
Most people will survive.
Yeah.
But, you know, a few unfortunates, a few million people will just...
Few million here or there.
Casualties. Yeah. It's like...
It's so absurd, and I could see where, in his case too, and apparently that was the only way he could crack the story, because he like devoured all these, like 50 books on nuclear warfare and was really kind of freaking out. And this was intended to be a serious film.
They wrote like 3 different scripts.
Right.
And one of them was from the point of view of an alien.
That's right.
Yeah.
That was
came down and said, well,
what are you doing?
And this is not intelligent life.
That's interesting.
And then he finally realized, this is, read this. This is nuts.
Yeah.
The only way to deal with this is a dark comedy.
Yeah, exactly. It's the gallows humor of like laughing in the face of mutually assured destruction.
Right.
Because I mean, but that
and even talking about it, like, well, if this happened.
You
know,
and they've got to do that. Military guys have
course.
to figure out all of these contingency plans for whatever. But at the end of the day, you can't sit down and say, "This is, we're out of our minds." Even
that we even have this capability.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I love even in the language into around like the deficit, the gap, and what does he say at the end when Strangelove is proposing his absurd
bunker gap,
the mine shaft gap. We must not let there be a mine shaft gap. It's like the arms race translates to the mine shaft gap race. It's like it's so intelligent, and the script feels like to me this perfect marriage of like, which he did again in his career. Again, I love Kubrick. He's
did a lot of fun stuff in deranged environments.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. But I was going to say, specific to sort of working with Terry Southern and having a perspective on something to then kind of invite a writer into his world. Like it felt like that became his MO as a director. He was really good at kind of identifying material, whether that be adapting a book or getting into a world and kind of researching it like in a very academic, dry, professorial way, and then inviting a collaborator to come in and kind of cut through the jungle with him. Like Full Metal Jacket was based on what's his name's memoirs from Vietnam, but it was also Kubrick kind of having his own vision. So it felt like he works like this. To me, felt like it's the collaboration between Kubrick's mind and his detail oriented mind. And
I think it was Terry Southern, but it might have been one of the other interviews I was reading. They said that Kubrick was such a brilliant filmmaker and all that. One of the reasons he was in love with Peter Sellers was he couldn't act or anything like that, and he saw this guy
who could do literally anything.
And he just and he was in a bunch of his films,
Yeah, he was.
But he said he can't write.
Yeah,
he can rewrite.
Right,
he can't write.
Yeah,
generate.
They are different things.
Generating material on his own seemed like a difficult thing. And again, this is coming from decades of devouring interviews and books about Kubrick, and this Taschen book is great. I remember you got me this on my 15th
You have
birthday.
the nicer version.
Yeah,
I have the smaller, more affordable
This is
one.
actually nicer because it's portable. The one I have is, it's a tome. But by the way, it was Fear and Desire was the movie I was thinking about.
Okay.
He shot that. Paul Mazursky was in it before he became a director.
Acting.
Yeah, he was an actor. And Kubrick wanted to go, went on a warpath to destroy every print of it because he just thought it was so amateurish.
Subpar.
Yeah. Fear and Desire. It's like a group of soldiers.
Yeah, I think I saw it, and Mazursky's
it exists.
Good. Yeah.
Oh no, he's not.
That's why he became a director.
It's not a very good movie. But it's
and a bunch of it was looped.
Yes,
the whole thing is
of
looped.
ADR. Yeah, exactly.
Well,
like Foley, everything down to footsteps,
We just did a podcast about Vanishing Point, and that whole movie's practically looped.
And one loop in Strangelove. Slim Pickens, when they go through their pack of goodies that they're going to take with them when they bail out.
One gun, one prophylactic.
And he says, well, a guy could have good weekend with this stuff in Vegas.
Yeah.
What he really said was Dallas.
Dallas. Oh,
And because Kennedy got shot.
Oh, wow. Oh, because it came out literally right after that.
Yeah. 64.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I think
That's
I
wild.
did read they were, which is probably one of the reasons that happened. They were supposed to have a big screening the day of the assassination, November
No way.
22nd, which they obviously canceled, but it affected the release date
Yeah.
because the picture was done at that
Yeah.
point, November. It didn't come out till end of January, I think, in 64.
Wow.
Yeah. And then Failsafe didn't come out until, I don't know, like June or July.
He had a lot to do with that, though. They
Kubrick
realized
did.
what was
Kubrick.
happening. This I learned this morning, and they sued the studio, Columbia, I think, whoever was making Failsafe, and basically to gum up the works because they said their plot was based on the book Red Alert,
same
which
story.
is the same story.
Right.
So it delayed things long enough that by the time they sort of settled,
It's fascinating.
Strangelove was
It's
already
happened
hit.
in Hollywood before, and it's almost like the type of thing that deserves like a full episode sidebar because it's like a really fascinating phenomenon. I mean, I guess it's
Well,
not.
what was the movie with Dustin Hoffman? You're thinking of about
Outbreak. There was
There were
that
two,
virus
and they
movie.
canceled the other one.
And then
Was-
Ridley was going to do one, but
Yeah.
then there was the Truman Capote movie about In Cold Blood, Capote, and then there was another one that came out called like Infamous with Daniel Craig that no one remembers. But it's again, it's not by accident because I think things get developing along the same track, and
Yeah.
they're like,
And
okay,
whoever
cool,
gets
we have
there
this
first.
property, we have this. So, but it's funny the way the legal battle will ensue of like who tit for tat kind of thing of like, I got this release date. Now we're going to budge you out of here. And it's
well,
funny.
we had we were the other night at dinner. We were talking about the Oppenheimer and Barbie and how they were just trying to screw over
Yeah.
Chris Nolan.
Yeah. I mean, it still
and
happens.
ruined the relationship with the studio.
Yeah, left Warner Brothers, and it was like the fact that they didn't leave on good terms left a bad taste in both of their mouths. And so, like, once he circled July as the date for Oppenheimer, which was, I guess, kind of always his month. A lot of his films have come out in the summer around the same weekend, so it's sort of seen as Chris's, release window. Warner like deliberately put Barbie in the same thing as like a
Just to
fuck
kind of
you.
screw him.
And then, of course, I would argue that
It helped both pictures.
yeah, he got the last laugh.
Oh,
because
absolutely.
It boosted their visibility for sure. I think people would have gone to see Barbie regardless.
And
But
back to the Strangelove thing.
Yeah.
I think it was Terry Southern's interview. He was saying that the studio was embarrassed by Strangelove. They didn't like it
Really?
at all. And they tried to subvert it by having if people called up the theater to say, hey, what's playing? Well, if Strangelove is full, you can't get that. Why don't you watch Victor's? Get
wow,
a ticket. And Victor's was the one that they were touting.
that's crazy.
And
In spite of
because
them,
of that,
yeah.
because of that, it didn't get great box office, but then it took off kind of because of critical acclaim.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
Well-
I was stunned when they were saying that the budget was $2 million for that movie. Even back then,
yeah.
seems modest.
He's just like he's
that
so
cast.
smart and
And most of it
economical.
was to Peter Sellers.
I'm sure.
Imagine.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it is really infused with his sensibility. I mean, even to the point where I think I read something that he introduced Kubrick to Terry Southern, like gave him a book of Terry Southern's or something. And I think once Kubrick had evolved to the point in his writing where he was like, this has to be a comedy,
And
kind
they
of became the
needed that
perfect pairing.
voice.
Yeah.
He had written a picture. I'm trying to think of the name of
The Magic Christian, was that the book you're thinking about?
No. It was a movie that he'd done.
Terry Southern?
Worked on. Yeah, before that they liked. I can't think of the title. We'll find it. Put it in the note.
The other thing to think about too is the structure of the film. There's no protagonist.
Yes.
It's true.
It's a 3-act structure,
Yeah.
but you don't follow, a little bit with Mandrake.
Right.
He carries you, a certain amount through it, but there's
Yeah.
nobody else and Mandrake's like the only sympathetic character. He's the only guy that you kind of go, oh, he's doing the right thing.
Yeah.
He's,
Attempting to do the right thing. Yes.
And
yeah.
everybody else, it's like,
Yeah.
but the guys in the plane, they're just doing their job.
They're doing their
Right.
job.
But,
Right.
but
Right.
that's insane.
Yeah, that is a really good point. It is this kind of a unique ensemble structure. And I mean, I think that's where I appreciate him so much as a filmmaker too, because you can tell even in the writing where he's thinking so much about the mechanics of a movie and like what, it is this kind of compress and release thing where it's like each of these environments bring you a different flavor and have that all shared kind of brings you through the movie in a really unique way. Whereas, if you're just kind of rooted in the war room
Just the
for
war
the whole
room.
thing or something, it's like it really helps that bounce around and have these parallel paths going on with people. But yeah.
Well, and also there are several ticking clocks, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
you've got the plane, and they're at some point they're either going to get shot down or they're going to get there.
Yep.
By hook or by crook. You also have the base, which is a potential way to save the world.
Yes.
But that's being attacked.
Yeah, you have multiple. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's smart in that
You
way.
know.
And then once you realize that, the recall code works and they're the only plane left, it's
Right.
just like that's
Right. Purity of essence. POE, OPE, something like that.
Purity. Yes, your bodily fluids.
that shot is so great when he's like, he's Sterling Hayden's already killed himself and it's like his notepad and there's like zoom out of Peter Sellers trying to figure out
Scribbling all
it's
the
just all these
possibilities.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, with the fluoride thing.
That's what I was.
I
That's why
had a
gave you
feeling
that
that's where
knowing
you were
look.
going.
Yeah.
Is RFK
RFK.
Jr.
Oh yeah,
That's
no,
like-
I literally was thinking the same thing last night watching it. Yeah, I was like, this is literally like
And
this
he goes,
rhetoric.
do you know the date that started? 1946. He goes,
Yeah,
"It's
how
commies."
does that fit in with the comic?
That's a coincidence, isn't it?
Let's talk about numerology.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And just try to keep him from completely losing
Yeah.
his shit.
I
And
know.
Peter Sellers was so funny.
I know. I mean, the two of them interacting is some of the best stuff. But go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was
Yeah.
going to say it's interesting to hear somebody your age
Yeah.
respond to it because like we grew up kind of baked into that nuclear paranoia,
Right.
Which
Yeah.
it hasn't really gone away.
It hasn't.
Everybody's still got the nukes, but they've reduced the number of them.
Right.
There are accords that Putin doesn't care about, but it was tamped down. The wall came down, and all that.
Right.
But for kids who did not grow up in that, it's interesting to see how it plays, and I guess it played pretty well.
It does. Yeah. I mean,
buddies.
exactly. It's a testament, I think, to the power of the movie too, that even now with the way our political rhetoric has just decayed into drivel and is like in some ways even, more insane than what the movie depicts,
Yeah.
like even Sterling Hayden's character and the bodily fluids thing. I mean, that is RFK Jr. talking about, and that man
Michael
controls things now. So
Yeah.
it's sad, but it's the perspective it has. It's that humanism, which is interesting to me that like there was an early draft in which it was kind of from like a, alien intelligence. Cause it kind of feels like it bears that there's something in there too, that still retains that essence of like the whole perspective is that no one's really, like you said, no one's really a protagonist. No one's really good. I mean, Mandrake is maybe the only character that's attempting to kind of right the ship, but even still,
The
it's
only
like,
other person that articulates, any kind of sanity is the James Earl Jones character. And
Yeah.
there was an interview with him in this, and where he said the scene was cut where he
does he have
says,
a moment?
is it maybe possible that this is a test, but it's in the movie.
Yeah.
So at some point he must have thought it had been cut.
there must
Or
have
maybe
been
it was
more of
longer.
yeah, it may have been longer.
Yeah. Right. He does.
Yeah, and he goes,
question it
I'm
for
just
a minute.
just
Yeah.
throwing it out there. And I think that scene probably went on for a little bit, but some of it stayed in.
Yeah.
But you want somebody should at least raise the specter
Yeah.
that this could be
Yeah.
not what
But I
everybody's
think,
intending.
yeah, I mean, part of the,
The radio obviously is the Mandrake thing. I love that. When
yeah, he brings
he's
it.
all excited, like, oh,
He's like, look, there's clearly
just-
someone in
yeah.
Washington.
somebody made a mistake. Let's just
They
get
wouldn't
those
be
planes
playing
back.
music on the radio.
I love the slow kind of when it dawns upon him that he's not dealing with a sane human being across the table.
When he
And
locks
Sterling
him
Hayden,
in.
he goes,
Yeah.
I'm not quite following you, sir. Like, I don't understand where we're going here. It's beautiful. And what an ending. I will say that is one of the most haunting endings. Having that, is it Vera Lynn who did that song?
Yeah.
It's like such a haunting combination of
And
that
that
with
in England was like the anthem of the war.
really.
Yeah.
So it's like a reappropriation of that in a way where it becomes this kind
To
of
tap into that feeling in England. And it also, U.S. Troops would have known that song as well. But in England, that was like the song that was associated with World War II. So it's a great choice. Because
yeah. It's like I'm literally getting goosebumps again thinking about it. Just having it roll over that footage of the mushroom clouds, and it just leaves you with
The Doomsday Machine. You go, I love Peter Sellers when he goes, the whole point of the rules, the point of the Doomsday Machine, if you don't tell anybody.
Why did you not tell anyone? Well, we were waiting for
really-
the party convention,
yeah. He's
The other
genius.
good sequence in that is when they get hit by the missile and
Oh,
there's
yeah.
all that blowing up. What a great little
Oh,
montage
my God.
that is.
Oh,
So
yeah.
good.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm sure it took them like forever to shoot.
Yes.
I was watching, they showed a clip of that again today in the little doc I was watching. And the way that the air gets sucked out of there, I was thinking, okay, back 1963 or whatever, or two, what the fuck? How did they shoot that? It must have been reversed. They probably blew in a hole and then just reversed it.
It's really well edited too. I mean, I think it's like
he did a great job. It's well
wonderful.
cut.
It's super precise. I mean, there's such an intelligence behind every decision, and it's like, again, knowing his career, it's maybe a little unfair to kind of only read it in the context of like what was to come, because he did 2001 right after this. But it's like that, a lot of that plane stuff to me does read as somebody who's like ready to take on a bit. It's like that. It's done to such a level of technical proficiency that even still it looks really good. I mean, you know, it's dated in some ways, but it's like it's accurate.
The only thing that's really dated is the plane over the going over the mountains. And
it's a model.
The sped up footage.
It's obviously a model.
Exactly.
They didn't do a great job of putting the light on the correct side. You know, like the hills, the light's coming this way, and on the plane.
Yeah, it's a little wobbly for sure. Yeah.
And you can't. What were you going to do back then?
I know.
You couldn't, unless you could buy or rent a B-52. And
exactly.
They wouldn't even let them look in the inside. A lot of that.
Well, that was an interesting tidbit that you shared.
I found out today. Apparently, there was the cover of a book, a nonfiction book somebody had written, and it had a picture looking towards the front of the cockpit of a pilot turned around, and that was the only image they had of what the instrument panel would look like, because the Air Force wouldn't let them have any record. They were not cooperating.
Yeah.
So this guy did tons of research and designed the set, and it was a separate art director, set designer that did that. He just gave it to one of his guys.
Yeah.
And apparently when they screened the movie, like the guys from the brass from the military were like looking at each other like, the fuck? How did they find out about all this stuff?
Yeah.
And Kubrick was freaking out. He called the production designer and said, please tell me that everything that's in that set was something you could get access to publicly. And they did.
Yeah.
But it was like right down to...
Yeah, I mean, it's like they reverse engineered like what the cockpit would look like down to every little thing.
And it's not like today where you can just go on the internet and find you can find the schematics for the new stealth bomber.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, no, they really had to fill in the gaps.
The other thing that's interesting to me is that Sterling Hayden's character, and actually sort of Turgidson too, is based on Curtis LeMay.
I did. Yeah, they mentioned that.
And I don't know if you remember
who's that.
He was a real anti-communist psycho.
He was a fanatic, right-wing guy. He was George Wallace's vice presidential candidate.
Oh wow!
And he ran the Air Force pretty much.
Jeez.
He had he'd been through World War II, and he had that mentality, the us versus them mentality. Which he then transferred to the commies, and he was very much with cigar chomping. Everybody always refers to him as, oh yeah, that cigar chomping guy, and that was really based in reality. The other thing he engineered was the Berlin airlift.
Oh wow!
And which was a phenomenal feat.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know the particulars on it, but it was like impossible, and they did it. So you can hand him a couple of kudos. Helped win World War II, and the Berlin airlift. But when it came to Vietnam, he was not a good influence.
Oh, I'm sure. I can only imagine where that kind of warmongering.
I believe he invented the thing of having multiple planes in the air at all times.
Oh, that was
with
him.
Bombs. Yeah.
Yeah, because in setting the premise of Strangelove, I mean that's like right from the jump they mentioned the fact
that set that up
they're airborne, and it seems like one of these things that's so far fetched, but that was an actuality. That was a constant 24/7 within 30 miles of their targets.
And they can't keep track of all of it.
Exactly.
They can certainly track them to some degree, but you don't know which ones are going to be live and which ones aren't.
It's insane. Yeah. So scary.
I know. So a little bit like MacArthur at the end of the war too. It was like he was great when they needed him, and then he wanted to keep going right into Russia. And it's like, let's take a breath.
Like Churchill. They hired Churchill to be the guy who
the bulldog.
Who went against Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
And then the second the war was over, it was like, nope, thanks.
Thanks.
We don't need you anymore. Yeah. Get that guy out of here.
Well, but another thing I'll say about Strangelove, because I mean it's the gift that keeps on giving. There's so much there, but the very, very kind of uneasy, sort of nauseating awareness that not the coziness with like former Nazis in the U.S. government, not only for the rocket program and NASA, but for a nuclear armament like that. That the Strangelove character is pastiche and absurd, but it's like that's also based in fact.
Von Braun, all those people that ended up helping us.
There's another guy that they based him on. He wasn't a German refugee or whatever, or import, but he was a guy who was in the government. He had kind of a German last name, and he was the guy who was the the chief Bland Corporation consultant that they formed their policy around. In the room. And in Failsafe, he was played by Walter Matthau.
Oh wow! Okay,
I want to watch. I want to watch Failsafe.
I think we should.
Yeah, it'd be an interesting pairing.
I can't remember when I was a kid. I think.
Yeah.
And he's very much like the heavy.
Yeah.
And like in Strangelove.
Yeah.
Who's the heavy?
I know.
They kind of all are, but
yes.
Yeah, and even the Sterling Hayden character, it's like you clearly know the guy's lost his marbles, so it's like he just needs help.
I do find there's something it's absurd and pathetic that like after his sort of Custer's last stand when
he's getting shot.
The walls are closing in on him, and he's like, I don't think I'd stand up under torture. Just goes to the bathroom and kills himself. It's like that's the kind of coward's way out, which is leaves Mandrake holding the bag. Yeah,
he must have been convinced.
I'm going to have to meet my maker and justify myself. I think I can.
It's so. You're just like, oh my God, it goes
I
from bad
Peter
to
Sellers
worse.
will go, yes, go in there, clean up, and give me those codes and clean up, and we'll take care of all this. And then the gunshot goes off.
That's like
it's too perfect.
Yeah, I know. It's an amazing movie.
All right, so Mark, let's go back, talk little bit about what got you started. Yes,
that's our little our segment marker. There we go.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about what got your career, what got you started in filmmaking. What was it that sparked your interest?
I was always interested in film. My dad had a Super 8 camera, and I went out and filmed a bunch of stuff and tried to put it together and kind of failed, but I was always interested. I was interested in comedy, especially, which is the Strangelove connection, I guess. And I used to do skits and stuff at school. They had a presentation. We were in a multi-purpose room, and they had a news show every day. And they get up and give and then we do skits. So I always used to do those, and it was kind of like you, a little bit Thespy.
All right,
and you were much more Thespy.
Yes, insert photos of Al.
I was always interested in film, and then I went to junior college and stuff. I took a couple of film classes, more like film history of things. And I said, wow, that'd be great. And then I moved to Costa Rica. That whole story,
right? And
came back, and I was looking for a 4-year college to go to. UCLA was the natural choice, and we went there.
Two UCLA grads.
I suddenly realized I had no clue that you could study filmmaking in college. It just never occurred to me that would be because everybody's talking about you study English or business or all the serious things, history, sociology, biology, and it never occurred to me. And we wandered into the film department over there, and I saw it in the catalog and said, wow, film, that'd be cool. And we wandered in there, and I remember a guy editing, and one of the professors was kind of sitting over his shoulder, kind of going, no, you could do this, you could do that, something else. And I was just fascinated with the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I applied there and was rejected.
Oh, wow.
Because it was very, very hard to get in. It still is.
Yes, even more so. Yeah.
And I had no clue that was, I'd been to public schools where you sign up and you go. Whatever you want to study, you go. Yeah. And that was an very impacted program. And so instead I studied communications at Cal State Fullerton. And they've got a really good communications department. They didn't really do dramatic films, but they were heavily into documentary. There was a guy there named Larry Ward, Professor Larry Ward, who was an amazing teacher, and he was one of those people who's more energetic than you've ever seen a human. He was kind of a smallish guy, but he had the energy of 20 people.
Boundless energy.
Yeah.
I love that.
And he had made a compilation film about World War I, and that was kind of his claim to fame. That was what got him established, and it was really good. He had the the entire, I think it was Black Hawk archives of newsreels from World War I.
Wow.
And so he had all this wonderful footage, and he put it together in a really great
Compelling.
way.
Yeah.
And he showed us all the great documentaries, and I was like, wow, this is wicked cool. Weissman's stuff, and the
Maisel Brothers.
Maisel Brothers, all So that got me excited, and we had a professor who was a visiting professional, a guy named Arthur Barron, who was a big verite guy in the 60s and 70s, did a bunch of stuff. He'd worked at CBS and in their film unit, with Edward Murrow and all that. He had some great stories about, Edward Murrow had a flask of whiskey at all times.
Well, you gotta.
Here, kid. You want some of this? Well, no, I'm okay.
That checks out.
Oh, I think I'll
checks
finish my coffee first.
Right. And
It's 10 a.m. Yeah.
And he worked with Charles Kuralt a lot.
Danny,
Yeah,
you
they're
probably
little-
don't know these guys,
They're
but
little kind of.
I know Murrow, but I don't
Kuralt
know
you
Kuralt.
loved.
Yeah.
You might have
On
you
the
might
Road.
recognize
Yeah.
him. On the Road was just a
It's a
wonderful
great series that he did for CBS.
And so Arthur had worked on all that stuff, and then he jumped ship. He wanted to do verite. Those are like very reportage sort of documentaries, and he did a bunch of them, and a bunch of them are really good. But he wanted to do more verite stuff, and he went to PBS, and he did a 2-part series called Birth and Death, where he followed somebody having a kid, and he followed a guy who had terminal cancer. And it's incredible, really gripping.
Full circle.
Yeah. And, in true documentary style, it's pretty rough, and they're running around back in the day before we had really light cameras and everything. And they may not have even had crystal sound at that point.
Right.
You had to be hooked to the other camera with the sound unit.
Insane.
And so Arthur came and taught. He took a liking to me. He really liked I wrote a paper in there about Luis Buñuel.
Amazing.
He really liked it, and he needed some help. He was doing a documentary about Japanese productivity on the line, where he took a bunch of guys from Texas Instruments in Silicon Valley, and he ran them through a factory or a few factories in Japan. And so they could see how things were done there, because the Japanese were rising at that point. And his editor was drowning in trims. A guy named John Joseph was editing it, and his assistant was Manuel Gudzinski, who was a Polish Jew from Argentina who lived in Venice. And he was like the greatest assistant editor I have ever seen in my life. And this is 16 millimeter, and they had shot like a bazillion feet of film.
Wow.
And unlike now where, it's on this drive.
Yeah.
It was like rooms full of boxes on the wall.
Yeah.
And John could jump in the room, John Joseph, the editor, he could jump in the room and say, Manuel, there's the thing where they walk down the path and they're crunching on the gravel and everything, and then they hop over the fence. Manuel goes, one moment. And he'd dive into all this film, and some of it was in bins, and he would come out and he would go, here, John, here it is right here.
Wow.
And he's the only guy I've ever seen who could pop a core back in once it had come out.
Oh,
Yeah,
in a film?
And you know the...
I know what that. I've had that happen.
That sound
you
means
just sit
that's
there and
happened.
watch it, like, oh boy.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
he was able, he had like super strong hands, and he could just kind of go, poof, probably scratch the living daylights out of it, but
Well,
that's
just-
better
but
than it all
only
being
that.
tangled up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like a legend.
Yeah. And he taught me how to be an assistant editor, and he did a great job of it.
Yeah.
And then Arthur didn't have any projects going on. It was right at the end or at the beginning of the Reagan Revolution, and they kind of gutted the PBS.
Yeah,
thing.
the funding got cut, right?
And I
Much
went,
like today.
yeah. And I went to, that's what I remember, when people get apocalyptic now about how horrible it is. It felt that way.
Yeah,
when
it did.
Reagan was in too.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I moved to the Bay Area because it's where my parents lived after I graduated, and just to have a place to stay. And I tried to get involved in San Francisco, and there's film scene there. And they're it was really tiny and funky, too close to LA. If somebody wanted to do something, they go to LA and get people.
Right.
But there was they did a lot of industrial films and stuff. And then occasionally Lucas would do something, or there'd be a Carol Ballard film or something, and everybody worked on it. Kind of jack of all trades kind of guys. Yeah, I can do sound. Hey, I can edit that for you. Yeah, you need an AC? I can be an AC, And, but there was a big documentary scene there because the Bay Area is so politically active.
Yeah.
And there was a series called Crisis to Crisis, hosted by Barbara. The name escapes me.
We'll find
Crisis,
out. We'll
Crisis
find
to Crisis, and it was very socially active docs, and I worked on 2 of those. One was a guy named Robert Hillman who did a film called Fire on the Water, and it was about the Vietnamese shrimp boaters in Texas and the Klan, which is a wonderful, wonderful film. And it was made into a feature. It got totally ripped off. I forgot who did it.
They fictionalized it, sort of.
Fictionalized it.
Yeah,
and
the premise.
And it wasn't nearly as good as the documentary, but it kind of killed the director because he was kind of hoping he could pull that off.
Gosh.
But worked on that, and then I worked on a thing called Children of Violence for a guy named Bill Jersey, who's also an old documentarian guy. And I learned a ton. And I was so fast at filing trims.
Yeah.
It's your old "don't be such an ego" story.
Yeah.
Like Sale. It was like I'm, like in my room, big room with a couple of assistants, and I'm filing trims and comparing the codes and sticking them up and rolling them.
Yeah.
And I look up, and like all the assistants from down the hall are standing in the doorway with a cup of coffee, kind of going,
Yeah. Look, young gun.
Look at this guy.
Yeah. You're making us look bad. Come on.
Yeah.
And that was also kind of a difference between LA mentality and San Francisco mentality.
Yes.
So at any rate, based on that, I got another job with Arthur once he got going again, and he took me to a PBS station in Huntington Beach, KOCE, Channel 50. And he was doing a series on cultural anthropology. It was a compilation series, so we were getting films from anthropologists from all over the place. If there was a good film on a particular subject, we'd get all of their original footage and recut it for our purposes. And I worked on that for a few years, and that really got me started. My buddy John Joseph, who had worked on Arthur's other film, I was like a PA, a general PA, and they were running me around there, having me carry this here and that there. And John knew that I had worked in post a little bit, so he said, come on upstairs to the cutting room. And they had this system. It was called the CMX Edge.
Oh.
CMX.
John mentioned the CMX
Touched
system
on this.
in his.
This was like before Avid, kind of.
This was like
way,
this
yeah.
was linear,
3/4.
This was linear tape.
Gotcha.
3/4 linear
Yes.
tape.
Yeah.
And it was the world's most user-hostile editing system ever invented. It looked like it was like editing on an ATM.
Oh my
A little
God.
tiny screen with these little buttons on the side and everything. And my buddy John, who had never done tape before, is figuring it out.
Right.
He did. I don't know how he did it, but he figured the whole thing out of how to do it. And you also saved all your edits electronically on a hard drive, on a disk, floppy disk, a big 5.5, and you had to do list management, which isn't a thing now, but it was extremely complicated. So he kind of taught me that and had me trail after him and do a lot of the technical stuff. And I got to where, I understood all of that going from there to online really well.
And just to clarify for people who don't know what that is, like a list management thing, as the edits compile in your database, and you have to clean it out of old ones, right?
Yeah, well,
Because they just one
where you
would
pull it up,
supersede the.
where you pull it up.
Yeah.
You pull out that information. There's all of these edits that are just numbers.
Right.
That you're changing the record time on.
Yeah.
You have to ripple, and that was a big deal.
Ripple the list,
Ripple the list. And if you did it wrong, it just threw everything out of sync. And
Right.
if you went and tried to online with that, it was just this big mess.
Of course.
And that was the way it was done a lot of times. It was a big mess. the people would go into online on different shows, and it would just all be screwed up, and they'd have to sit there in an online room, which was extremely expensive to operate.
Yeah.
And figure out what was wrong with it. And we had a system down where we could go in and auto-assemble, which was you just let the computer go.
Amazing.
It laid down all the stuff. And at any rate, this is way into the weeds.
No, I love this
And
stuff.
also, some of this is in the
our previous episode.
the crew list.
Crew list.
Oh,
I talked about it.
Yeah,
okay.
because Mark was a guest on that.
So at Channel 50, one of the editors was this guy from New York, Jonathan Pontel, whom Al knows very well.
Yes, I've heard the name.
And Jonathan, he had moved from New York. He'd worked at CBS, so he kind of knew Arthur. And he had worked on 60 Minutes for like a long time. He'd also done some features and stuff. He'd been an apprentice on features.
Yeah, you worked on The Exorcist.
Yeah, he was an apprentice
wow.
on The Great story about Billy Friedkin.
Yeah, a couple of good ones.
Yeah. And Jonathan had moved to L.A. and no one would hire him because he hadn't worked on tape. He'd always worked on film.
Oh, wow.
And he had a resume that, I would be like, if I saw that come across my desk, I'd be, hire this guy, but no one would, oh, you haven't done tape. Oh, well, sorry. Come back once you have a few shows on show. And so I kind of helped him. He let me do the technical stuff, and I kind of tried to help him learn it a bit. And he kind of pulled me into the dramatic world. He's the guy who pulled me into Picket Fences. So that's like my big break. Gotcha. And I'm very
I remember meeting
Jonathan.
you. I was still assisting. You came over to
right.
have lunch with Jonathan, and that's the first time we met.
The scripted dramatic
We
world.
met. I believe we were both 27 years old.
Yeah, we're the same age.
Yeah. And I went and had lunch with Jonathan. And I mean, after that show, that PBS show, I did another PBS show, and I did maybe 10 years of documentary stuff. I did some HBO documentaries. At some point, I was kind of like just desperate to do dramatic. I'd never done it. And I think everybody, you kind of get into it. You watched Disney movies as a kid and you want to make dramatic films or comedy or whatever. And then I got interested in documentary and kind of got, taken in that direction. But I still had that idea that I wanted to do drama, comedy, scripted, they call it now.
Yes.
And so when I heard that Jonathan was on Hill Street, I was kind of in touch with him a lot. Hey, guy, can I come by and see? And he finally, had me come over, and that's when I met you. And a few years later, and I kept in touch with him after that too. A few years later, he got Picket Fences, and he was going to move up and be the associate producer. And they needed one more assistant. Yeah. Now, he hired me as an apprentice because that was cheaper, and to get me in the door. So it was very much worth it to me to go ahead and do it. It was
quick this was after you had Jonathan had relied on you a bit to get oriented with tape workflow, because you guys worked on something prior to this. So it's like you had that kind of relationship.
Yeah, and he knew that I was technically savvy. Yeah. And that was also a transition point. We cut the pilot on the montage.
That was another system that came up.
A wacky system. Yeah. Unlike anything else, it was very unique.
A little bit more user-friendly than the CMX? Or
yes, much more.
Oh, yeah.
It was random access, at least.
Okay,
well,
well, that's
we were
good.
working on 3/4-inch tape.
Yeah.
You couldn't make a change in the middle and go, pull a few frames out. You had to wait until you made another pass and dub down to that spot and then make some edits. And then
crazy.
So you had to make a mental note of it.
When I get back to this.
Yeah. And montage was it was a bunch of VHS machines.
Oh, yeah.
And they were, all spinning around, queuing up. So you had to sit there and wait for a preview. If you were going to preview and edit.
That's
you had
crazy.
to sit there and wait.
Yeah, they'd all race down to the optimal place to go to all start at the same time.
And you can hear the transports clicking,
Oh my God.
as they're arriving at their destinations. And then you could watch the edit or the scene or whatever. So I think, Jonathan felt that I'd learned that, and I did. I learned it pretty quickly. And then that period of time was very, technical. There was a lot of technical innovation in post-production. So pilot on montage, started the series on Edit Droid.
I forgot you guys were on that too.
And then we ended up on Avid.
Okay.
And all of those permutations, you had to learn this whole new system.
Oh, yeah.
It's like learning a new language every time you start a show.
Yeah.
And
I thought the biggest learning curve for me was the Edit-Droid, but once I learned it, it was so easy.
That was the George Lucas one, right?
Yeah.
Or
But it took forever to get it down. But once you did, I had that.
it was kind of, in a lot of ways, it was the worst of both worlds.
Yeah, it was.
It was like the worst of film and the worst of tape stuck together. But it worked.
It worked.
And he was phenomenally fast at all that stuff. He just boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
And everybody else was kind of amazed. Oh, Alec knows how to do this.
I don't think I do anymore.
Yeah, well,
But at the time, I was pretty technically adept, and Jonathan realized, get him in here, and when we make transitions, Mark can handle it, and blah blah blah. So
Didn't hurt. You're also really smart and talented filmmaker.
Yeah, and pleasant to work with. Yeah.
I hope so. But so Jonathan dragged me into picket fences with him. And from there, I moved to Chicago Hope, where I worked with this guy. I knew him. You were right next door.
Yeah,
picket
we
fences and
were
LA Law
bungalows
were right next door.
Yeah.
And in fact, I assisted.
On the Fox lot, yeah? Century City.
I assisted for like 2 weeks on LA Law when they were trying to cut down on the number of assistants.
Oh, yeah. 3 and 2. That was a big thing.
Yeah.
Cutting down on
2
the
assistants for 3 editors. So.
Avid was running around selling their product. I mean, I love Avid. I think it's the best system. But they were running around telling producers, oh, you don't need assistant editors with this. Oh, my God. It's so simple. You don't need an assistant.
Yeah.
You know, you could say, think how much money you can save. And of course, the production manager's going, oh, yeah, let's get that.
Their attention.
Yeah.
And then later, what do you mean we didn't need an assistant?
Yeah.
You told me you didn't.
Yeah.
So they were like trying to figure out a way to do 2 for 3 where you'd switch off.
Oh, yeah.
And you can do it, you know.
You just basically, as an editor, have nobody sort of assigned to your show from beginning to end,
Right.
which is a problem.
Well, and then it's also tough on the assistants to kind of do this hopscotch of jumping from this hot potato to this.
Well, it's boring for
not-
them, too,
yeah.
because they never get a chance to be in the room when you're getting notes or making changes because they have to prep the other show
Yeah.
for online, and then somebody else is doing the dailies.
And then you don't have that fallback of like somebody who's watched all the dailies
Right.
and knows where all the stuff
That's
is.
the benefit.
And
Yeah.
they can find stuff that you don't even know exists.
Exactly.
That's not in the notes.
Yes.
And they know the history of where the cuts have gone. You know,
That
like
is-
you can relate to that, Dan.
Editor's cut, director's cut, mini producer cuts.
Yeah.
And the assistant kind of goes, oh no, it was like that before. You did the thing with the thing. And
Yes.
and you might forget that because you're in the
Of course.
headlights dealing with the producers and everything. You might not remember,
Yeah.
you know,
100%.
what the sequence was that you had there before. And he goes, no, go back to this, you know,
Yeah.
this thing and just pull that out and stick it in.
But when you don't have someone on for the full soup to nuts of it and that continuity, it's like then you're.
Well, your project, you just basically just wrapped up.
Yeah, that was, I mean, that's the
Sloths
first time
and
I've
Rack.
been on something from sort of origin ingest point, literally getting hired to ingest and organize the project to also cutting it. But it kind of happened by accident. And prior to that, I mean, I think it's related to what you were talking about. Sadly, I don't think that impulse has gone away for people to penny pinch and try to get rid of assistants where they can. It's like, even with, you know, I mean, the scripted, unscripted thing, I think they're stupid. It's the nomenclature is so dumb because it's storytelling. It's not like there's like a binary between these things. But when I was working at Vice, I was a AE that was shared by like at any time half a dozen editors. And it was a nightmare because, I mean, great in some ways that I had the opportunity and I was like across different things, but it was like the exact thing you just mentioned that like I would be sort of tapping in at a given point on a project. They might be close to finishing. Another one was just getting started, but I wasn't able to, because I was spread so thin and they didn't have another AE. It's like I was never really able to absorb any one project and be helpful to an editor because I could only be there for these little snippets of time.
The
and
value of that
Yeah.
when you're trying to explain to somebody that doesn't want to spend any money,
Right.
They don't care.
Yeah, and it was totally a, you know, well, we got you, so you're the Swiss Army knife, and we don't need to hire anyone else. I'm like, well, I mean, on a technical level, I can help, but I don't know the story. I can't really contribute in any meaningful way.
And so in a way, it's you're cutting off their nose to spite your face because those people all become.
Yes.
They all become the film editors and filmmakers at some point. And when they have this gap missing I think one of the most important things for an assistant is to be able to be involved from the everything.
Yes.
You know, all the different things you do.
Even if you're just hearing the editor bitch and moan about the film, you know, you learn something about, God, they don't have the angle is here and you can't see the this or the that. And I wish I had this. And as an assistant, you're like soaking all that up, going like, what do you mean? Why would that be important? You know, I don't have to hit the reaction here. I got, he's not, the eye lines are all wrong. Yeah. And then you learn what all that means.
By osmosis, by being in the room.
Speaking of eye lines, did we not discuss having a whole pod about the 180-degree rule?
I mean, and the way it's broken too.
It's both
sometimes
a rule and can be broken.
Yes, in exciting ways.
And we were on shows where it was very important, like LA Law. You have a table of people around.
God,
dialogue heavy.
Yeah, you got to know who they're looking at,
and they're like giving a sly look to this guy and an innocent look to this guy. makes quite a bit of difference
Right.
who they're doing it to, and you know that from previous scenes where they've got an alliance with this person and they're trying to accomplish this,
Right.
and they're trying to snow this guy. So if they look, and a lot of directors, don't think it's important.
Anything cuts.
Yeah, anything cuts together. There's a great story Soderbergh told that I think we've talked about, but it's worth bringing up on the pod because it's totally related to Eyeline, and I won't get too bogged down in this detour, but it's worth mentioning. He was shooting the first Ocean's movie, I think, and which is obviously a giant ensemble thing, and that's a great movie. It's so fun, and clearly he had fun doing it. But there was like a scene where it's when they first sort of propose the heist and like what they're doing. It's the kind of exposition scene of like Clooney and Brad Pitt standing up there. They got the whole room of everyone assembled and they're going through the details. And he was kind of, I think, under the gun that day. They were a little behind. He was about to embark on this big scene and trying to figure out how to shoot it and how to do the coverage. And he had everyone clear out of the room, right?
Yeah, I remember
because he just needed a second to sort of think about it and get his head straight. And he was like, I just need the camera to be where the table is. Like everyone's seated around this table, and the eye lines and everything it was really starting to, drive him crazy of like, how do I pick this off? I need so many different setups. I owe this guy this and this and this.
Yeah.
Cause he says a line to him, and,
it can get pretty complicated.
Yeah. He had a voila kind of epiphany moment where it just all got simplified down to like, that's my axis. I work around that, and that's where I get.
If you're in the middle,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
I think he took the table away and then sat on the floor or something and went, "Oh."
But I always love that he told that story on himself because it's like it is. I mean,
he was stuck.
I think some people have that visual language second nature. I think there's some filmmakers where they already kind of think that way. But he's somebody to me that's like, he is highly visual, but he's also like, he's honest, and he comes at it from an editing point of view too, which is cool. And like,
there are people who will tell you, I just naturally gravitate towards the perfect thing.
Right.
And they're full of it.
Of course.
Everybody struggles with that.
Yeah.
I remember once there was some big scene that you were talking about with Michael Dinner, and he was going, oh yeah, that scene, I got so lost. And it was really refreshing to hear that, because when I was on Picket Fences, all of the directors were like, oh, well, yes, of course. It's just, it just exudes out of me.
Yes,
it's like my genius.
No, it's easy. It's easily done. You can get. I after years and years of cutting, and then I was directing. I got on one episode where we were in a doorway. Mm-hmm. I'm standing there with the operator, and we're going, wait a minute. Like, wait, hold it. It took a second. And I thought of all the, it's like second nature when you're sitting in an editing room, but
it is.
You're not seeing anything else.
No,
you're
exactly.
Just seeing.
That's the benefit.
Yeah,
right,
you really have to be able to step back and go, okay, hold on.
Well, I do think that's why being an editor lends itself quite nicely to directing. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's that is in a way, it's like, well, it goes back to Kubrick too. I think he has some quote where he says like, every other aspect of filmmaking is borrowed from the other arts, whether that be dramaturgy or writing or performance theater. It's like the only thing native to film is the editing of it, the bending of time to create what appears to be, linear visual logic, but like that geography can get so screwy for people that you take it second nature when you're watching
thinking
it.
about Strangelove, that table.
Yeah.
Talking about a big table.
It's huge.
But I always felt I knew where everybody was, and it's tricky though. You can this amazing set, and then you get in there and you're going, how am I going to shoot this?
They make some really clever decisions though in terms of cover, like when the president version of Peter Sellers is talking to
Scott. I love that they put them far. They're not real close to each other.
Yeah.
It's like,
and the decision to keep the sound boomy in those wide shots where it's like it's supposed to feel like this cacophonous, crazy, cavernous room.
Yeah.
And then the closer.
Well, that light hanging over it.
Oh, God, it's so good.
The brilliant thing. It just,
he's going to see the board. He's going to come in and see the board.
The big board. Backing up to being an assistant in the documentary world, and then moving to film or to dramatic film, narrative, scripted, whatever you want to call it. When I tried to do it, it was impossible. You basically couldn't do it. Jonathan had done it, and that was the only person I'd ever heard. Right. He had to go back. He'd been an editor for 20 years, on big stuff, and he had to go back and assist to make the transition. And he had somebody helped him out to do that. And he helped me out.
Michael Vitti's.
Yeah.
That was the guy who helped out Jonathan because they knew each other. Right. They had history.
So basically, when I was trying to do it, like I called up the guild to try to, can I join? And, maybe I'll get, And they basically said, no, you can't.
Like your hours from the doc world didn't translate to.
They said, doesn't count.
Oh my God.
You got. I worked on a soap opera.
That must have been
Thing
crazy.
called The Judge, and it was really, they had like a line cut on video and then one ISO. So you went in and you tried to pull it up and get the reactions in the right place and all that stuff. But it was like, a chimp could have done that.
Yeah.
And they go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's dramatic. So I got on the, the roster. I think I got in the union, but not on the roster.
Which is, Danny's been going through that, and then when all the strikes hit. So
yes, yeah.
He's got all his ducks in a row.
But, but it is funny to come from a world of like high volume, because that is something that does remain true about most docs, and especially if you're working on verite stuff, it's like you really do, not that you're not working as an assistant on scripted or anything else, it's a very shared skill set, but I do think the one thing a doc does have is like, the volume of footage, right?
But at any rate, that's one thing that's good now is you can work as an assistant in the reality world and learn, all the technical stuff. And like you say, keep track of everything and be organized. And then they will take you seriously to get a dramatic job. Yeah. There's a learning curve, and they know that, but they understand that, this guy knows Avid or whatever.
I wanted to go back a little bit though, because living in Costa Rica is something I want to hear more about, and sort of your background there a little bit, if you're willing to talk about it. Yeah,
sure. No, my dad got transferred to Costa Rica. We had moved around a lot because his company that's how they kind of weeded people out. And if you took a promotion and you had to move, that was proof that you were in to win. Right. And if you wanted to get promoted, you had to take these. So we moved like every year and a half, pretty much, and we were living in Walnut Creek. He had been up for the job before, and some other guy got it, and that guy was still there. But they made him the job in Costa Rica was the head of operations for Central America and the Caribbean. And the guy who had that job and for like a year and a half then was made the South American guy. Okay. So they were kind of working out of the same office. So my dad goes down and they do a scouting trip with my mom, see where we might live and all that stuff. And then I moved down, and I thought, I'll go down. I was 18. And I thought, hey, man, I'll see a new country, learn the language, whatever. Yeah. So we moved down, and my brother thought I was nuts. He was staying here. He was like, you're out of your mind. I said, I remember joking with him one day that, maybe I'll get an ocelot for a pet. And he was like, you're nuts, Mark. You're out of your mind. So I moved down, and we were living in a hotel while this house was being built that we were going to move into. First, we looked for houses, and we didn't find anything we liked. And then they found these guys who were building a house, beautiful house. It was owned by the people who owned the biggest furniture factory there. So they had all these tropical hardwoods, like all the floors were parquet, and they had these like amazing craftsmen put it all together. Some of the wood is so hard you can't drive a nail into it. They have to use pegs. Wow. They have to drill it out with like a diamond drill and then put these pegs, at any rate. So we're in the hotel, and my mom has a friend, the wife of the guy who preceded my dad, who's taking Spanish classes at Instituto de Lengua Española. And it was a missionary school. But they'd accept special students, and boy, am I special. So my mom was like, well, great, we can go here to learn and, all that. So I signed up there, and my mom was going to school there, and that's where I met my wife. She was my phonetics teacher. And also, I got to say, that place, I believe sincerely, is the best Spanish language school in the world. Really? Because they're getting all these guys, they're getting all of these missionaries from all over the United States and Canada, and they have to teach them to speak Spanish in a period of 3 months. And then those guys are going to be out in the jungles of Peru translating Bibles, right? So it's like boot camp. Yeah. And they have it arranged. I mean, this is into the weeds, but they have it arranged so that you got a conversation class, you got a grammar class, you got a phonetics class, you have something called exercises where you put into practice the grammar and just do repetition, boom, boom, very boot camp. Right. And then you get like 3 hours of homework every night. So you go, like half day. And the way that they integrated all of the, like you're in conversation, you're talking about all these different things and learning all this different vocabulary. That same vocabulary is then used in the grammar class. They're using the same verbs and they point to them. You had to memorize all these dialogues for the conversation class. And that's what they're doing in the grammar class. And then the exercises class, you're just practicing every tense, repeating and repeating. And then they put you, okay, in third person, what is it? In nosotros, what is it? And it just like drills into your head. And some of these people who they had to deal with, who were from Podunk, Arkansas, had very little linguistic ability, And I think I was fortunate. I had studied German in high school, so I kind of knew how to study a language. Yeah. And I was also fortunate that I didn't study Spanish, because then I would have had to unlearn so much stuff.
Because of the way they...
And instead, I, learned from native speakers. They don't speak any English there.
Amazing.
You go in and
immersion.
They just okay, and they'll slow down and they'll point, whatever, but we're just going to speak Spanish here, and you're going to have to follow along.
Yep.
And my wife was my phonetics teacher.
That's crazy.
And they always say that phonetics teachers are dangerous because you're doing the forms of the vowels, a, e, a, o. And when you get to u, oo, it's the position of a kiss. So you have to watch out. Yeah. And it was true that she knew another phonetics teacher there who had married, or she almost married the guy who had married a sister-in-law of hers. So and he had gone to that school. So it was
gotcha.
There was a history there. So I got hooked up with Hania, and we, saw each other like every day for a year, running around San Jose, and I met all of her family and all that. And then I was going to go back to school because I wasn't finished with college yet. I had a lot under my belt. I had like all of my general ed out of the way, but I had to go back to like a 4-year institution. And we just decided, hey, we'll get married, and you come with me, and we'll both study, and we can kind of tag team work and whatever. And we came back, and kind of the rest is history.
And now you've kind of come to the pinnacle here. You're on Timecode Cowboys.
That's right. This is what I was shooting for that whole time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it gets better than this.
Someday I'll be in Pasadena.
Yeah.
Sitting at a folding table on a folding chair.
Yeah.
This is
not the most ergonomic
glamour of Hollywood. I know. Yeah. I got to
living the life.
I do remember when you did Tropical Iron, your documentary about Minor Keith, correct? Who sort of was like the railroad baron of Costa Rica. Is that
and all of Central America?
And all of Central America.
Yeah. And he opened up the banana trade.
Crazy.
Yeah, that like people didn't know what bananas were in the United States at that point.
Wow.
And there was also Boston fruit. Doing the same thing in Jamaica.
Was this like late 19th century? When was this? Okay. Yeah.
And they formed a company called the United Fruit Company.
The Imperial Playbook. Yeah.
Costa Rica was a little lucky. I mean, they also had this enormous resentment against United Fruit. But all of their operations were on the Caribbean coast. And San Jose, which is the big city, is up in the mountains, on a central plateau. So they kind of took over Limon, which is the city on that side, and that's where all the banana plantations were and everything. But it wasn't like they screwed with the government and everything. Yeah. And also, Keith was a little more benign than the Boston fruit guys were. Sure. That they literally overthrew governments and whatnot. I could go on for hours about the whole thing, but
the doc is great too. I would encourage people to watch it. Yeah. And I actually shot a bit of B-roll for it when I was living in Brooklyn. Greenwood Cemetery, which was like a stone's throw from where I was living, is where Minor Keith is buried.
It is.
Funny enough. So I went over there with like a little DSLR and got a couple shots for you. So yeah.
Small world.
Yes.
It is. To paint it.
I know. But yeah, I think the background you have is something like I really aspire to as well, because I'm kind of it's similar to you. It's like, if I can be honest and talk about myself for a second, I came into film, wanting to do narrative, scripted, whatever. Those are the things that first kind of touch you when you're younger. And then, kind of wind up in this world of doc stuff, which is great and fun. And I don't see much of a delineation between it, but it's funny for all the decades, that have intervened and the things that have changed. And I feel like now the Guild and MPEG is much better about, they will at least acknowledge ours if you've worked in reality or doc.
Yeah. I think they saw the light a few years ago as they started to ease some of those restrictions.
Well,
because
it's just not
the
fair.
problem is you create a really talented labor pool that's not in the union.
Right.
And so if you're that unfriendly to new people coming in,
Exactly.
you're going to end up becoming irrelevant.
Yeah.
Which
But you
was
have
the
the best of
danger.
both worlds where it's like you were able to still move between both of those worlds with relative ease, which I admire as well. It's not like because there are some people, or at least, according to their IMDb's, I've, studied careers. I'm like, how did they jump from this to this? And it's like, sometimes they'll just leave the doc world behind and that's it. But you were very much active in both spheres.
I've always tried to keep a foot in both worlds.
Yeah.
And part of that's just self-interest, that I wanted to stay busy all the time, and there were many times where over the hiatus I'd take on a documentary project just to pay the bills, or like when I had to become an assistant again, I was making a little less money, so I'd work over the hiatus to fill that space and make up a bunch of money and coast through the rest of the year. But also just it's stimulating, and it kind of works different muscles than the dramatic thing. And as an editor, it's kind of an editor's medium that you get out, they shoot all this film, and then you have to figure out how to make a story out of it.
Yeah, that's where the writing happens. Ultimately, it's like you're writing the story, which I understood in the abstract, having heard it talked about so much, and documentarians I admire, and like Werner Herzog and Wiseman, who I think is actually a great editor. Frederick Wiseman's films are amazing. I'm a big fan of, just the
Tidicate Follies.
Tidicate Follies is crazy. Also was banned for a while, right? There was a Supreme Court injunction against it or something.
I remember it being controversial that he's exploiting these poor, people who can't really give their permission for this and all that. But to me, it was such a humane film. I mean, it showed. There's that scene, maybe you remember it, where the guy's singing into the camera.
Yep.
He's just standing there, belting out this song, and then he realizes the camera's there, so he's kind of like doing it to the camera, and he's winking and all that, and he's just out of his mind.
I'd never seen
Oh, they went into a mental institution outside of Boston, right? And it was like he had been taking because he was teaching law at that point. I think they went on some sort of a field trip, and he discovered how deplorable the conditions were, and then began bringing a camera in kind of this very grassroots way. And it was his first movie, but it just it exposes some and pretty fucked up shit.
It's not really about that.
No, it's not like an expose.
Yeah. I mean, you see, and it's really difficult. These guys have to wrestle these kind of maniac guys down and give them pills and stuff. If they act up, what do you do?
Yeah.
But to see it happen,
he does present it in this kind of beautifully sort of neutral, which a lot of his films have that kind of flavor to them, where it's like, it's sort of the pure kind of.
It's called direct cinema.
Direct cinema,
he did, as opposed to verite.
Exactly.
And most of what people refer to as verite is actually direct cinema. There's a whole academic
debate about the terms.
It's actually film industry. Certain people were advocates, Chris Marker and all those guys.
Oh, I love Chris Marker.
France. Verite meant you stuck a camera in someone's face, and because they were aware of that, it brought out emotions that you ordinarily wouldn't get. Whereas direct cinema was you kind of hide and just show what's going on.
Just there, fly on the wall.
Yeah.
So he's very much direct cinema, but it like kind of humanizes these guys, and they're messed up. There are a lot of really messed up people in there.
Yeah.
And then you realize these people have to take care of them, and these guys live there this whole time.
Yeah. It was definitely in doc classes where I first got introduced to him, but then would go kind of further down the list because he's so prodigious and still working. I think the man's like 92 years old, and he makes a film a year at least.
There's a great one. There's a great one called Meat.
Oh yeah,
I think I saw that.
When they always have like the most direct. It's like high school meet gym, or it's just the They go to a slaughterhouse, and luckily it's in black and white. Yeah,
we've got too much material.
We do,
clearly
we do. Gosh.
So that means a second visit.
Yeah,
we got a lot of stuff in.
We do. We got
store. You're going to see this guy a couple more times.
Exactly.
But at that being said, this edition of Timecode Cowboys.
Oh,
hang on. That being said, this edition of Timecode Cowboys.
I
We
almost
bid
got
you
that.
adieu.
We bid you adieu.
Bid you adieu.
Tune in next time. Thanks, guys.